So, star 3 up. We can drive together now. We can drive together now.
Oh, no!
What if the road you were on decided it was driving you instead, and the sign stopped telling you where to go and started telling you what you owe? What if a voice on your CB answered from tomorrow, and the way station up ahead tallied more than your cargo, weighing the part of you that never learned to look away? Welcome back to Whispering Abyss. Tonight, I have something truly haunting for you. 5 trucker stories, stitched from sleepless miles and glowing dials, told like secrets traded over bitter coffee at 3 a.m. From mile markers that shouldn't repeat to fuel stops that appear, serve, and vanish like a bad promise. Every story here is a mystery waiting to unfold. If you've ever driven long enough to hear your own engine breathe back at you, you know which story creeped you out the most. Let us know in the comments and buckle up. Story 1. Mile marker 19 never ends. Mile 19 slipped past my windshield with a slick green blink, and I swear I watched it happen twice before the odometer finished its next click. The turn signal ticked even though the stalk was centered, a slow metronome tapping at a rhythm my hands did not set. Rain licked the glass like a tongue, cold air knifed from the vent, and the world smelled like stale coffee and wet pennies. I eased in my lane and blinked once, slow, the way you do when the night gets into your blood. By the time I opened my eyes, mile 19 gleamed again, paint fresh, numbers wet, like someone had just repainted the night itself. They call the long hours the dog watch. It is the stretch when your best promises meet their receipts. My name is Eli Carr. I run freight when decent people are asleep, and I keep my route by making a window that says 5:30 a.m. and squeezing through it with minutes to spare. Dispatch already had me on thin ice after 2 late runs. One more, and the good routes would go to someone whose eyes look more like mornings. I told my sister I would call when the drop was done. Early bonus locked. You tell small lies like that to keep moving, do you not? The GPS told me 37 minutes remaining. The road told me something else entirely. Inside the cab, it was metal breath and hot plastic, the fuzz of the CB slider where the chrome had gone dull, the faint copper stink of a spilled penny roll under mat. My left blinker ticked under my breath like a slow clock. I cracked the window for the rain hiss and watched mile 19 roll past, just once, clean as a bell. When 3 minutes later it flashed again, brighter, newer, a smear of damp paint shaped like a finger drag cut through the one, who repaints a sign in the time it takes to swallow coffee. The second wrong thing came quiet. My CB was parked on channel 7, volume low. Out of habit, I keep it alive, company for empty states. Through static came a whisper that did not belong to any trucker I know. A number spoken like a time. 119. The same slow tick matched the syllables. I looked down. The odometer glowed 119,019. I took a quick photo for the log, then another for my nerves. 30 minutes later, through rain that thickened like old soup, the odometer still showed 119,019, as if the truck and I had agreed not to count. A rosary swung from my mirror, one bead missing, tapping my view like a patient finger. I noticed the billboard next. It had been shredded by wind a dozen times. The kind of highway religion that outlives whether words that used to sell something and now sell a mood. Only one way home. An arrow scrawled across a field of black. The arrow leaned. The next time mile 19 slid past, the smear looked longer. A finger became a hand, taking the number by the jaw. The turn signal tick kept time with my breath. slow and persuasive, as if it knew what I wanted to believe about construction and detours. That was the red hard candy of the night. Cone showed up 3 lanes over, orange like good sense. An amber beacon swam in fog. GPS hesitated and redrew, the way it does when a farm road or a state closure slaps new directions under your wheels. I told myself the obvious story. Ongoing night construction. A detour loop that would spit me out near the old quarry and make everything make sense. I fed a little speed back to the pedal, gave the engine a voice. 2 crimson taillights sighed into view ahead, a ghost truck drifting with its marker lights dipped. I checked my mirrors and almost took off his paint. Only it was not a truck, just taillights hung in fog. And then not even that. The next pass, the smear on the sign had become a handprint press wide. 5 translucent streaks. The arrow on the billboard felt different. A little more left, a little more insistent. The CB spoke again in a voice like a highway shoulder. Check channel 7 at 119. My thumb hovered over the transmit. I let it fall. The silence that came after had the weight of a choice. Back on damp blacktop, the same squash paper cup sat like a landmark 3 feet into my lane. I signaled out of habit. The tick suddenly fast and slow and cut around it. The part of me that solves problems reached for the hazard switch and stopped, as if touching it would be a surrender. Fuel range dipped faster than miles covered. I have seen that when wind shove a wall at you, but there was no wind, only rain and the hiss of tires. The turn signal tick stuttered and fell off the rhythm of the flasher light itself, like 2 clocks arguing. I took another odometer picture. 1 mile change, no more. Ahead, the rain pulled into curtains and parted. A figure stood next to mile 19 sign. Head bent, arm raised, a brush moving in patient strokes. My heart produced a sound close to a stall. I touched the horn once, and the figure did not turn. The wet number gave off a little shine, as if it were breathing. When you are the only light for a long stretch, the night accepts you. It opens its palm and lets you in, then it closes. My phone showed no bars. The GPS froze with its green triangle waiting. The CB hissed and crackled without voice, just old air. In that pocket, I missed a 10-minute check call. To dispatch, that keeps the early bonus alive. The window snapped shut, and I felt my route go wobbly. If I kept circling, I would be late and then light, and then someone with clearer eyes would get my mornings. On my left, the highway offered more of the same loop. On my right, the unlit service road angled into trees and broken fences, a promise that tasted like a dare. I could have kept pretending it was construction. I could have let the truck be smarter than me. Instead, I brushed the hazard switch with 1 knuckle and felt the world shift by an inch. The click of the hazards lined up with the tick of the left blinker in perfect sync for the first time that night. Cone stacks that formed lazy pyramids a minute ago stood now like soldiers in a different pattern. The GPS unpaused and then froze again, but not on the same frame. The CB gave a brief, sharp pop, like a microphone laid down on a desk. For a second, every sound was in step, and I knew the loop was listening. I tested it like a bad door. Hazards off. The world lost rhythm. Hazards on. The click, click. Tick found the minute again. I rolled forward to the squash paper cup and stopped so close I could see the wet cardboard fibers. Hazards on. The light bled across its white skin. In the reflection, it looked like the mouth of a small thing. Hazards off. I rolled an inch, then on again. The next pass there was no cup. You, listening, would have done the same experiment just to prove you are not losing it, right? The world should not change when you touch a switch, unless the world is answering you. The voice that answered did it with confidence, like a dispatcher reading from a script. Eli, check the coffee. The voice described my cab without being here. It named the coffee stain in the passenger footwell, and the way the rosary was missing one bead. It asked if the penny roll had come all the way loose. Static swallowed the channel, and then the voice hummed notes of a tune I have sung to keep awake. I had forgotten I hummed. I tasted metal when I realized the voice was not a stranger. It had that tired smile I hear only in mirrors. I told myself I would turn around at the next legal spot and take the long way. The map showed nothing but a straight line back to where I started, as if the road had been drawn by a child. To my right, the service road, cut dark and wet. The billboard with the arrow hung again, only one way home. The arrow pointed to a seam in the night. It felt like an old joke. I had driven that service road once with a trainer who never took off his sunglasses. He said, "Do not, unless you like mazes." My dash clock crept toward 1:10. You ever feel time narrow into a keyhole you know you will have to look through? I did the thing that seals fate in stories like this. But this was not a story on Thursday morning. I turned onto the service road and let the highway slip past like a golden river I was done with. Trees leaned across the road like a roof. The hazard click met the tick of my turn signal and kept step. I turned the CB to channel 7, set the mic on my thigh, and told myself that at 1:19 I would speak and be done. The smell of wet pennies swelled until it was a room I lived in. The rosary bead, the missing one, tapped something near the hazard switch and settled there. The service road carried no reflective numbers, only strips of asphalt like healed scars. Then, a little way in, I saw them. Small 19s painted on the shoulder stones, in chalk or something close to chalk, repeating every 30 feet. Each one touched by a thumb that dragged through the 9. I rolled to a stop by a sign that had no words, only a smear of wet paint the size of a hand. The brush sound I had heard was not a brush, but my wipers complaining across a dry patch. But my brain kept trying to name a painter. The handprint on the inside of my glass, where I had not put one, lined up to meet the smear outside. At 1:18, the CB skipped channels and found my own voice on the other end. It was a recording without being one, the sound of someone about to admit something ugly and ordinary. I heard myself say the names of exits that were not here. I heard my own laugh at a joke about old drivers who touched the rumble strip and swear they were awake. I remembered a night months ago when rain came down like a curtain, and I woke to the sound of my tires humming on the fog line. Just a kiss over the paint. I had told no one. The missing bead clicked free and tapped the hazard switch twice, polite as a knuckle on a door. 119 blinked up on the dash and chewed a second. I picked up the mic and watched the smear on the sign bead with water. The odometer flickered like a blink. 119,119. I realized the loop did not need me to find the truth. It needed me to say it and pay the toll. I pressed the transmit and spoke into the rain. I said I nodded off at mile 19 months ago. I said I clipped the sign hard enough to make it wobble, and then I drove on because the bonus mattered more than the embarrassment. I said I would call the number on the back of the sign and tell them to send a crew. The words left my mouth and felt like gravel on the glass, the handprint I had been trying not to see pushed down from the inside. The glaze of rain on the sign outside shaped itself to match, a palm pressed to a palm through an inch of old air. The tick of the turn signal stopped as if a conductor lowered a baton. The hazard click held the beat and then softened, the way a heart settles. The voice in the CB became me again, but not the me who needed to confess. It was a me who had already done it, and he sounded lighter by an ounce. I watched the smear run, the 5 streaks slimming into lines like tears. The painter by the sign looked up and finally turned, and for half a breath I thought I would see someone strain to the bucket, but I saw only the truck in a warped window, my own face where a worker might have been. The brush had always been a wiper. The cones had been the same cones, not a moving detour at all. The only thing that changed was what I was willing to change. A tremor ran through the chassis like metal sighing, and the road unrolled for me, straightening without moving. I did not want to consider what would have happened if I had not spoken at exactly the minute I was given. Dispatch came back on with a crackle and a yawn. Eli status. The voice had sleep in it and no judgment. I told them what they needed to hear. The GPS popped awake with a bright chime and showed 22 minutes to the drop. In the rain, the cone stack stood in a pattern I recognized from 100 honest maintenance nights. The paper cup was gone. The fuel rain stopped falling like a stone. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 and let a breath out that had been trying to escape since the second mile 19. The billboard returned as if from a longer, slower world. Only one way home looked like an ad again. The arrow and not a finger. The rosary swung in such a way that the bead I had been missing tapped the switch housing like yes, like found. It had wedged itself under the hazard since some forgotten afternoon. I took the bead off the floor and squeezed it in my palm, and the metal smell rose again, private and shameful. You think you know why a night is haunted until you count your small debts and find one with your name on it in your own handwriting. I made the dock at 5:46, late enough to lose one kind of money, and early enough to keep my route, which is a different kind of home. The clerk behind the glass took my bill and did not look at the wall clock. He wrote the time in with neat numbers. 1:19. He said it as he wrote it, 1:19, even though the wall clock glowed 5:46 and change. He kept his pen moving and kept his eyes on the paper as if the number had been waiting for him. He said they had a driver who clipped a sign out by 19 a while back and paid for a replacement without a fuss. I did not ask who made the call. I apologized for the delay because it was the only decent thing left to say. Dispatch told me my mornings were safe, and the bonus was gone, but not the truck and not the work. I stepped out into rain that had gone thin as thread and called my sister. I told her I would get some sleep before I tried to be a brother again, and she laughed and asked if I meant it. I promised in a voice that sounded better than the one I had used with the CB. The tick of the left blinker kept time under everything even though the signal was cold. Back in the cab, I shut everything off, the way you do when a machine needs to remember it can be still. The turn signal tick kept counting by itself, soft and stubborn, up to 19, then quiet. I watched the odometer and let my eyes prick at the number that did not care about me at all. 119,120. Numbers do not forgive. They just go on or they stop. I put the bead back on the rosary and let it swing in a way that did not tap my view. When I pulled away, the dock lights painted long ladders on the wet pavement. In my side mirror, a worker in a yellow vest bent near a post, and for an instant the shape made my mind say painter. But it was only a vest and a man with a wrench. Mile 19 would get its sign back, and the smear would be a rumor. In the cab window, a faint handprint rode with me. Not on the glass this time, but in the place behind her eyes where old choices sit. I wiped at it and left only a clean circle on a fog I had made myself. That night I parked under a sodium lamp at a truck stop where the coffee tastes like rain. The turnstile was neutral and my hands were clean, but somewhere inside the dash a relay rabbit clicked 19 times before it slept. You can think this was stress or a dream with tires, or a story told by a tired man who needed to make sense of an ordinary mistake. If you have ever heard a road drive you, you already know there are minutes that are keys. The tick counted up and then went quiet. I sat with the quiet a long time and did not touch the hazard switch again because I did not need the world to answer me to believe it had. Story 2. Channel 7 after midnight, the CB hummed on its own like someone sleeping inches from my ear, a low, steady breath under the engine. I had not touched the mic outside. The highway lay quiet as a held note, white lines sliding past like the edges of old film. Dashboard lights felt too bright, too green. A dry scent crept from the vents, a mix of hot plastic and the memory of lightning. Then a voice said my name before my mouth even opened. Clear through the static, the way someone says your name when they are already in the room. It was after midnight, the hour when caffeine turns from a friend to a bad idea. I was riding the tail of a delivery window tight enough to shave with, praying the yard guard would not care if I came in at the wrong gate. Long miles behind me, a few mean ones ahead. The CB is company at that time, but I have a rule. Never chat after midnight, never on 7, and never with someone who uses your name first. Rules keep you from learning the wrong lesson. Rules also make you curious. A few hours earlier, I had split a pie at a counter with a driver from Nebraska who had that prairie way of talking quiet. He stirred powdered creamer into his coffee like medicine and said, as if we were discussing weather, "Do not use Channel 7 after midnight." His eyes did not blink while he said it. I laughed to soften the air and told him I barely use the radio at all. He said nothing, but he tapped the side of his battered mic 3 times and left cash under the sugar caddy. The waitress watched him go like she knew a story she would not tell. Out past the county line, the CB squelch stuttered, a tiny blue spark nipping my fingertip when I reached to dial it back. I pulled my hand away and tasted metal. Through the speaker came a tune I had not heard since a garage with a cracked window and a cheap fan. Red River Valley. Hummed off key like a man who never found the right starting note. I had not thought of my father in weeks, which is how I tell myself I am fine. The hum held 2 bars and quit, like a door that almost opened. I was going to say breaker and ask if anyone else heard that. Before I could, the radio said breaker in my tone, and then repeated my name again, this time like a question. I shut my mouth and gripped the wheel as if a tighter grip would change the air. The smell of hot wires thickened. The engine felt normal. Gauges steady. Only the CB behaved like it had been waiting for me to think. It breathed in. It breathed out. I set the volume low, but the voice was never loud. It did not have to be loud to be near. I told myself the sensible thing. Somebody was running with me a mile back, maybe 2, bored enough to play games. I saw a pair of hazy headlights hovering in my mirrors, a low white day cab with its running lights dimmed to mosquito glow. The voice named my road an angle of wind, called out a patch of black ice ahead that turned out to be nothing. It told me my fuel range within 10 miles and laughed when I checked. I pictured a young driver with extra toys and a long night to kill. I pictured him grinning into a headset. I tested the voice like a cop taps a taillight. I said, just thinking I should stop for coffee, and then I clamped my teeth. 10 heartbeats later, the voice said exactly that sentence in my own rhythm with one small change. It added the word again. I should stop for coffee again. I had not said again. I did not like that it fit. I said knock it off without speaking, because sometimes that is how you talk in a cab. The radio chuckled the way I do when a joke misses. My lungs forgot the old schedule and took up the one the static set. Channels 3, 9, 12, back to 7. I spun the knob. The hum followed. I unplugged the mic and set it on the passenger seat. The smell of ozone swelled, as if rain had fallen inside wires. The power flickered in the CB face, a pulse like a blink, and the speaker breathed in time with it. The voice said my old call sign from a lifetime ago, as if we had been talking all night. The sensible story wobbled, but still stood. A prank rig, a dead relay that would not die. Something I could explain if I were not alone. I pulled into a rest area to buy 5 minutes of quiet and a refill I did not need. The maples along the lot clacked in a small wind. The bathroom smelled like cleaner and coin. In the vending alcove, a bulletin board held Polaroids of drivers with trophies and the kind of photos you tape up when the office feels like a church. Tucked in a corner was a hand-printed card. Channel 7 is for daylight. It was taped crooked. On the way out, an old guy in a cap with a winged will said an even hello and then asked, "You keep yours on at night?" I told him I never chat after midnight. He nodded like I had just passed a test he gave everyone. Back on the interstate, the clock in the dash turned stubbornly toward 1. I told myself I would hold my rule and ignore anything with a voice. At 12:55, the radio went quiet. Just the road, the tires, the hiss, the soft McCoward calls peaceful. At 12:58, the silence felt wrong, like a hell breath that would not release. I shut the CB off. The silence stayed, bigger than it should have been. At 12:59, the white day cab drew even in the mirror, then fell away. I tightened my lane and breathed for myself and told the radio nothing, and in that minute, nothing told me back. The quiet saved me from a stupid mistake. A deer cut the lane just before a bridge, a pale streak where the shoulder pinched down. I braked to a legal count and did not fishtail, though the anti-lock jumped under my foot. If the radio had been talking, I might have looked the wrong way. The deer cleared and the bridge opened, and I let a laugh out that did not sound like mine. For a mile, the night behaved. My rule had teeth. I thought I had won, just a little. Around the next bend, the hum returned like it had never left. Red River Valley again. 2 lines too slow, sung the way a man sings when he is working with both hands. My father used shaped words around that song, while solder smoked and old radios woke up one more time. We did not talk about him out here. I keep my past behind the driver's seat where the flashlight rolls. The CB said his name. It said it gently like an apology. I had never said that name on air. That was the piece I had kept. Hearing it, there made my finger go cold. The day cab in the mirror set a comfortable distance and held it like a dance partner. Red marker lights along its roof winked as if it blinked at the same places I did. I turned the radio down to a mutter, and it did not matter. The voice described a coffee stain on the passenger footwell. It asked how the chip in my enamel mug happened. It wondered out loud if the photo tucked into the visor was taken at the lake with the crooked dock. I stared at the empty highway and told myself there were cameras in places I did not see. Telling myself that story was easier than saying the other word. One by one, small threads fell away from the world. The speedo needle trembled and then went to 0 while motion stayed. The dash backlight took on a hospital color. The blower slowed to a wheeze and held there. Every gauge I needed remembered it was a needle bolted to a face and forgot it was a promise. The only thing that did not dim was the CB. The speaker breathed like a man who had run stairs and come back proud. The smell of ozone thickened until I felt it in my teeth. I rolled the window for air and tasted metal instead. Pulled to the shoulder, the voice said, almost tender, "Left steer is soft." I told it no, because no is a word you can build a shelter with. The left steer felt like the right, true and steady. The radio let me hear my own no played back with a different end on it. It attached please. It said my name and then said please. The bridge ahead had no shoulder and an incline of planner added on paper. If I stopped, there would be a decision I could not undo. Behind me, the day cab held its distance, as if distance was what kept us safe. I kept the lane and covered the hazard switch with my hand, without pressing it. The button felt warm. The radio sighed a sound that did not come to the speaker, not completely. It came from the passenger seat, low, the way a person sighs when they have settled into a borrowed coat. I looked to the right without meaning to. Nobody sat there, but the seat had a shape to it the cushion had not made. My scalp pulled tight all on its own. The truck rolled into the bridge with the world lit only by my own two cones. When the only thing left talking is a radio, you start to think about what silence is made of. In the garage where my father camped his nights, he used to say the air fills with a signal if you wait long enough. You do not want to be the shape that signal chooses. He taught me a trick. If you cannot trust what comes to the speaker, listen to what you yourself do not say. That is the part that is real. The CB said my name with my father's weight. It asked him to say his name back. It asked as if the asking would not end until I did. I swallowed. Not saying kept me safe a minute ago. Not saying kept that deer from being my last surprise. I kept my father's name in my mouth. Immediate safety is a kind of prayer. The voice did not argue. It shifted. It used my laugh again and attached it to a story I told once at a party with people who did not matter. It built a picture of me out of scraps and then handed it back like a coat I did not remember buying. The smell of hot wires swelled, so that every breath burned a little. Lightning without light lived in the dash. At 12:59, I made a promise to myself that felt like clicking a belt. When the clock tripped to 1, I would ask the nasty question and accept whatever came. There are times a choice is a bridge, and you do not get to walk back the other way. The second rolled over, fat and heavy. I picked the mic up because leaving it was a choice too. The plastic felt warmer than it should, warmed by a hand that was not mine. I said, "Who are you?" And the last of my rules watched me from the rear view and did not follow. The answer came in layers. First his tone, my father's voice with the humor shaved off, the sound he used when a circuit bent the wrong way but might still live. Then my voice on top of it, as if we spoke together in a badly tiled bathroom. Then a third voice I could not place, high and low at once, like a chorus where each singer has a different mouth. Sparks crawled delicately across the face of the CB like silver insects. The volume knob lit, and the tiny ridge burned a neat line across the pad of my thumb. I did not drop the mic, because dropping it would have been the same as nodding yes. Headlights ahead disappeared into a white wall that was not fog, not rain. It was static in front of the world, texture like a television with no channel. The engine kept time without me. My hands held a wheel that could not tell me if road still existed. The radio said the next 3 things I want to say, each one a half second before I said it. It became louder when I tried to speak over it, quieter when I went still, as if I lived inside its diaphragm. I had the ugly thought that if I kept talking, I would be talking forever. There's a point where you have to stop feeding a thing that feeds on you. Even if starving, it means it leans close to see what else you are made of. I did the only trick left to me that had a shape. I hummed Red River Valley into the mic, the way I learned as a boy, low and steady. And then I spoke my father's name like a note you place in a wall. The plastic sizzled under my fingers. The smell of ozone filled the cab like a weather front. I hummed one more bar and stopped completely, hands on the wheel, mouth shut, breath thin and mean. The radio reached forward for the rest of the song and found nothing. I listened to my own silence ring in the space where a word should be. The chorus voice faltered, came apart into 2, then 1, then a whisper that sounded embarrassed to still be present. I did not break the quiet. I held it as if it were antique glass in the road, as if it were water. The static wall thinned to lace, and then to falling snow, and then to ordinary rain. The light on the knob died with a last pinprick snap. My thumb stung like I had been careless with a match. Power bled back into the truck in small sips. The speedo woke. The blower remembered how to cough. Headlights found trees and reflectors instead of the nothing that had tried to be everything. In the mirror, the white day cab was gone as if taken off the road with a careful hand. The CB sat black and simple, a box in a place where a voice had stood. I put the mic down gently as if it was someone's hand and reached under the dash of the fuse I keep loose for desperate minutes. I pulled it anyway. The speaker made one last breath and went still. The highway delivered me to the yard on time by numbers I did not trust. My head could not say if those miles had been real or borrowed. The logbook showed a gap of 3 hours where GPS said I was at a steady roll. I hold my time tight. I do not lose 3 hours to daydreams. The guard did not yawn when I mispronounced his name. The clerk at the window signed my bill of lading and hummed Red River Valley under his breath, soft and off-key, the way a person hums when they are grading a form. He did not look up while he did it. He tapped the corner of the paperwork twice with his pen, a habit that could mean nothing. He said I was good and asked if I wanted the same doc next time, which is a question they do not usually ask. I said sure and kept my burned thumb tucked where I could not see it. On the way back to the cab, I thought about the warning on the bulletin board, about the old driver who did not blink, about voices that come from inside a shape you think you own. It is easy to tell yourself a story where a prankster with a radio rides your mirror and fails to make you swear. It is harder to tell the other one. I killed the engine and the lights and the auxiliary, the way you do when you want a machine to forget you were there. I turned the CB off by the switch and left the fuse out and set the mic in the glove box, wire laid neatly. In the dark, the speaker gave the tiniest tick. The sound was not a spark. It was a small breath. I counted to 10. It answered at 10 like a person playing a game. Back and forth we did that, me counting it, breathing, until I laughed just to make it stop. Laughing did not stop it. Nothing did. I will tell you a thing without telling you why I know it. Channel 7 is a hallway after midnight, and hallways are not places you live. They are places you pass through. If you stand in one too long, something comes to greet you, and it will sound like the person whose permission you need. Maybe it is only a story truckers pass in places that smell like coffee and cleaner. Maybe it is static that happens to shape your name, because that is what your mouth expects. Maybe the same nothing fills with light when you stare at it long enough. Tonight, I will not check. I still drive. I still talk to people who deserve it and to no one who does not. Some nights the itch to reach for the mic is bright as hunger. On those nights, I put my burned thumb against the steering wheel seam and feel the ridge like a scar that belongs to someone else. The burn line is thin and exact, the kind a jeweler could measure. It reminds me that a breath can be a question, and a voice can be a set of teeth, depending on when you listen. It reminds me that there are minutes when silence is not empty. It is a hand asking for yours. When I pulled away from the yard, the clock flicked past 3 without drama. The sky had that chalky look it gets before trucks draw lines across it. I told myself I would call my sister before I slept, and I meant it in the way a person means anything at that hour. The CB sat dark. The speaker did not breathe. In the glass, the yard lights cut through fog like thin knives. I reached to adjust a mirror, and the radio made one small exhale, not a word, not even syllable. It matched my breath and trailed it by a patient half-second, like it was practicing. If you have ever heard your name spoken from a direction no compass holds, then you already know how this could be true. If you have not, good. Keep your rules simple and your channels quiet. If a song finds you that you did not start, let it pass like a stranger in a hallway. If a voice says your name first, forget it knows any other word. And if you hear breathing where there should be none, see if it matches yours. If it does, drive on and give it nothing that belongs to you. Now we move to the next one. Story 3. The empty way station. By the time I rolled off the interstate, the way station glowed like a fish tank in the dark. Every fluorescent strip was buzzing, every window white, the scale platform humming like an oversized refrigerator. The open sign pulsed in agreeable green. Only thing missing was people. No troopers, no clerk behind glass, not even a stray cigarette in the ashtray outside the door. It should have felt like winning the lottery on a rainy night. Instead, the air smelled like a hospital hallway. Chemical sweet, too clean, like someone scrubbed away the part places that proves they're alive. I am Ryder. I run heavy and I run honest, because paper is a knife that cuts the same way every time. Dispatch had flagged me once already for bypassing a backup station during a thunderstorm, and I promised I would never do that again. Tonight my log said I had to weigh before midnight or lose a route I have guarded like a last tooth. I could feel that deadline like a coin under my tongue. The engine clicked as it cooled in the rain, and the scale clunked twice even though nothing sat on it. That clunk sounded like a heartbeat you hear through a wall. Inside, the office lights beat down so hard the floor looked wet. A mug of coffee sat by the keyboard. Brown ring, already drying, handle angled toward the window like someone had just set it down. The fluorescent fixtures sang a note that felt a hair sharp, then cut to silence for a second before finding themselves again. I called hello, the way you do when you want to prove you mean no harm. Nobody answered. The smell of cleaner got stronger toward the door, marked records in red stenciled letters. I told myself the night clerk probably stepped out. I told myself a lot of things. The bulletin board behind the glass window wore a neat grid of driver names on pushpin slips, each with a date. I leaned in. Every date ended the same month. 2 years ago, like the calendar itself had decided to quit. I checked for a pen and found one with a chewed cap, still wet from teeth. The computer screen displayed a wave program I have used in a dozen states. A green prompt blinked for the next plate number. When I touched the mouse, the cursor chased my finger like a dog. If you have ever walked into an empty room and felt watched, you know the kind of hello I had in my throat. Out on the pad, my truck sat broad across the painted lines. The scale clunked once more, and the desk printer sputtered. A blank slip skated out an inch, then stopped like it changed its mind. My phone had enough bars to make a call, so I lifted it and then put it down. You do not call dispatch to say the empty air is acting helpful. The office clock ticked toward 11:57. I could still make midnight with a clean conscience if I weighed and left. I took a breath, set my name block on the counter, and walked outside to center the load just to be perfect. Rain pecked the aluminum handrail. When I stepped on the platform, the scales hummed deepened, and the clunk came again, softer, like a heart settling after a run. I eased the rig forward 6 inches, then stopped and looked at the glass. The keyboard had moved, only half an inch, but the angle was wrong, and the coffee mug handle now faced the door. I felt silly for noticing. I felt frightened for noticing. I turned back to the office, and the fluorescent lights went silent for a heartbeat, the hum dropping out so cleanly I heard my own breath answer. I went in to finish the job before I could talk myself out of it. On the counter sat a printed weigh slip with my license plate. Axle totals, gross, all neat, all accurate, and a line at the bottom waiting for a signature. I did what any good boy under a deadline would do. I signed. It felt like cutting a ribbon, clean and ceremonial. Relief filled my chest like warm air. I tucked the slip in my logbook and reached for the door. The scale clunked 3 times in a row behind me. When I turned, another slip had slid from the printer. It was my way, same numbers, but this time my signature already lived there in my handwriting. I told myself scanners could do that. I told myself the system had a quirk where it copies for clerk. I held the second slip next to the first, and the ink looked the same age. The fluorescent hum drifted sharp again and cut out for a blink. In that clean silence, the keyboard turned itself a quarter inch, and the cursor jumped to the field with my name. Each letter appeared without a hand. R-Y-D-E-R. The coffee mug's ring widened as if the heat caught up with time. I put my finger on the mug and flinched. It was warm, warmer than it had a right to be without a person attached to it. I checked the pad. Empty. No trooper shoes by the chair, no jacket on a hook. The bulletin board still wore its list of drivers frozen in the same month, 2 years gone. As I leaned closer, I realized the paperclip had shifted on one card since I first looked, the way a thing moves when someone breathes on it. I stepped back and told myself cameras could explain all of this. Remote operation is cheaper than night staff. Automated scales cut costs. If the clerk was watching on a screen in some other county, then the warm mug was a joke or a mistake. The thought fit in a way that made me feel stupidly brave. The scale clunked again when I opened the record's door, except it did not open. The handle resisted with a soft rubbery give, not locked exactly, just unwilling. The chemical cleaner smell leaked from the seam like it could not wait to be in my lungs, and I backed away with my hands up. Somewhere behind that door, someone coughed, a dry sound shaped like a word that never learned how to talk. I froze, because coughs are the most human things and the most contagious, and there is no reason in this world an empty station would have a cough in it. I went outside to clear my head. The air tasted like wet wood and brake dust. My truck's running lights were steady. I climbed up the shutter down and found the engine already off, key still in the slot, like a polite hand had turned it for me. My radio flickered and showed no service. When I thumbed the starter, nothing answered. The battery light stayed green. The gauges watched me like patient eyes. Back at the door, the fluorescent hum cut, a beat of absolute hush, then returned harder like a throat clearing. The clock on the wall jumped from 11:59 to 12:01 without visiting midnight, and I felt the deadline slide past with the softest knife. Inside, my original sign slip was gone from the logbook. In its place sat a third slip. Same plate, same weights, new date, tomorrow's date. My signature again, identical down to the little snag where my pen catches a groove I have worn over years. It is one thing to find yourself cloned by a machine. It is another to be signed by a day that has not arrived. I turned to the bulletin board and saw a fresh rectangle of cork exposed in the middle like a missing tooth. When I leaned closer, I saw the pushpin already had a ridge of paper dust on its point, as if it had pricked something soft. I pressed my thumb to that pin without thinking. It was tacky like glue still drying. The scale clunked behind me in a rhythm that matched the pulse in my throat. Once, pause, once, pause, not hurried, not calm, just a body being a body. I wanted to leave right then. I wanted to punch the air because the air had hands on me. But if I left without proper way, the fine would land on my log like a stamp, and dispatch would smile without moving their mouth as they took my mornings away. A person creates their own traps. I went back to the computer and told myself again about remote sensors and smart stations. The program on the screen flipped to the prior day's logs without my touching a key. Names I knew from a lot appeared on a list labeled held, like the word you see on an invoice you cannot afford to pay. My plate number nested there with a timestamp of 12:01. A printer in the corner woke with the cheerful sound paper makes when it survives its roller. Slips began to slide into the tray, each one stamped, each one bearing different names. A few I recognized from bulletin boards and truck stop missing posters, the ones where the tape has yellowed and nobody takes them down, because taking them down is an admission. A few had photographs attached, paper clipped, smiling the way drivers smile when they're trying to be serious. I told myself police had access to the station printers for legal reasons. I told myself my name could be on any number of lists, and it would not mean the thing that phrase felt like. That red herring was warm and believable. It hugged me. It said, "Stay and you'll be fine." It said automation is just a fancy word for people doing what they used to do with better toys. Then the computer typed my full name, middle included, and spelled my mother's maiden name afterward. And I felt the hug become a set of arms I did not want to be in. I went back out to the pad, because outdoors sometimes breaks bad dreams. The scale was empty and loud. The clunk came again, now closer together, not quite my heartbeat, but willing to learn. I found a coffee mug by the scale shack door, the same mug from the desk or its twin, ring-dried perfectly in the same shape. I set it in my palm. Cold now. In the dust on its side, a long oval showed where someone had pressed, and I recognized my own fingerprint in miniature. The whorl near the tip I know from a greasy smudge on my old phone. I did not remember touching this mug. I was not the kind of man who left fingerprints on things that were not mine. Back in the office, my truck play on the screen had moved from held to cleared and then back to held, as if a hand under the desk were playing with my future like a coin. The bulletin board had sprouted a new card with my last name typed crooked, waiting for a first that would look better next to it. The fluorescent hum dropped out and the silence held 2 beats this time, long enough for me to hear the faintest scrape from behind the record's door, and that cough again, like pages turning in a dry throat. I realized the door had shut itself behind me. The latch rested with authority. The knob felt warmer, now in a way that spoke of blood. I checked my phone for the time and found the lock screen gone. In its place, black letters on white. Way complete 1201. I do not own a phone that says things like that. The scale clunked in time with the words. My muscles had that can-opener tension that makes you want to laugh or break something just to feel gravity work. I thought about leaving. I thought about the fine. I thought about men who had walked away from their routes and never found another one as good. I thought about the coffee mug, still carrying me on it. Then I thought about proof. If I could open records and see whatever trick was in there, I could beat this story back into the real. Fire axe behind the glass with the words in case of emergency. I took it because choice sometimes needs a shape. The case popped easy, too easy like a door in a set. The axe had weight and a sticky film on the handle I did not examine. I wound up and chopped the knob with an ugly sound that blended metal and bone. The door did not fly. It yielded a finger's width, enough for the cleaner smell to gust out like a memory trying to escape. That smell was stronger now, sweet like a dentist and wrong like a sailor in a church. I put my shoulder to the door and pushed, and it gave up as if it had only been waiting for me to decide. Records looked like a schoolroom after everyone left. Wire shelves, banker boxes, LED clock without hands, reading 1201 forever. The fluorescent lights died in one long sigh, and for a second I saw only the glow from outside, the green of the open sign painting the boxes a sick underwater color. The scale clunked in the dark, and the sound was in my throat at the same time, perfectly matched. I put 2 fingers on my neck and felt a drum there, and the drum and the clunk were one animal. The printer in the corner purred and slips kept sliding out in the dim, falling into a tray that never filled. On one wall, bulletin boards floor to ceiling, layered 3 deep with driver cards, names, plates, dates. At the far right, space reserved for fresh pins. I stepped closer and saw my name already printed, full and correct, with my route and plate, The paper still damp at the corners like it had been pulled from a mouth. I looked for a camera to blame, a motion sensor, a bored kid with a remote joystick. I found none. What I found was a clipboard hung on a hook with the word weighed, altered by hand to weigh, not past tense. Present, a verb that keeps happening as long as you stand here deciding. I reached for the slips to show myself the trick and saw the top one board date from last spring. Driver I knew from Amarillo, who never called for loads again. His signature strong and kind, the way he made everything look easy under it. Another I knew who used to tell jokes at the pilot like they were favors. The printer spit a fresh page with my name and the word held stamped in the corner in red, as if a heartbeat had learned to write. The scale clunked faster now, not panicked, only eager, like something finally getting what it asked for, in the lid of a banker box. Fingers spelled in dust the words only one way out and then swiped themselves away as if ashamed to be helpful. I stared until my eyes hurt, and then stared another second. I could not read that as anything but my own crazy. You can blame the dark for a lot. You can blame a dirty lid for whatever pattern your fear wants. You still have a truck outside and a life on the other end of drive, and hands that can carry things or not. I picked up the axe because my hands wanted a job and put it down because the only thing to swing it was myself. The cleaner smell pressed close, thick and sweet, and for the first time I thought of why a place might smell like that when nobody sweeps. That thought tried to grow teeth, and I refused to feed it. The fluorescent fixtures ticked, ready to return, then chose not to. The glow from outside grew stronger, and I realized the open sign was brighter than it had been, bleeding through the blinds, painting the word in reverse across the file boxes. The letters traveled across my shirt as I breathed. The P landed on my chest, the point of the arrow pressing cold as a coin. The computer screen outside the room threw a wedge of light that slid across the floor and found my boots. It showed a progress bar, a cheerful percentage that reached 100 and then reset to 1201. Weigh complete. Weigh again. The bulletin board near me clicked, the way a throat clicks when someone swallows something they do not want. My card stayed where it was, but the pin next to it shifted, point angled toward the place a photograph would live. If you have ever felt a space make room for you without your permission, you know how my knees felt hollow in that moment. I stepped backward out of records because the air had stopped being air and started being a decision. The door swung with me, obedient now that it had what it wanted. In the office, the coffee mug had migrated back to the keyboard, ring fresh again, steam no longer faking. I lifted it without meaning to. It burned the pads of my fingers a little, and when I set down, the handle pointed at the door like a compass that had decided where north was. The scale clunk matched the thud of my chest, 1212, and the printer eased out another slip bearing my name with a date I had not reached yet. I could have waited for morning and a human face. I could have barricaded the door and demanded explanations from whatever cough lived behind it. I could have stayed and watched my own paper duplicate itself until I learned how to accept it. Instead, I did something smaller. I took my original signed slip back out of the logbook and put it where I had first found it, lined up with the others, as if returning an offering to a shrine. Immediate consequence. The scale clunk softened and the fluorescent fixtures hummed back to life all at once, like a polite audience applauding a confession. Delayed echo. As I turned to go, the bulletin board gave a tiny creak, and I watched my card settle a fraction deeper into the cork, as if pushing the other side by a careful finger. The open sign outside dimmed to a reasonable glow, and the smell of cleaner thin enough that I could taste rain again. The clock decided to admit 12:02. I tested the door and it helped me leave, swinging wide with the humility of a good liar. My truck's engine started on the first ask. The radio found service in a place with no towers. I pulled onto the pad because that is what the living do when they have roads and lungs. Morning came in a color that made the world look like it forgave you, at least for now. I rolled into the delivery yard with my paperwork, arranged the way I always arrange it. The yard guard waved me through without asking for the slip, and I handed it over anyway, because there are rituals you do not skip. He looked down and smiled at a joke only he could see. Wait at 12:01, he said, casual as kindness. Nice timing. Inside the cab, the scale clunk I had left behind found me one more time, quiet and far away, a sound memory can make when it wants to remind you it has hands. I parked, set the brake, and watched the fly trace a tired circle around the visor. My phone showed yesterday's date for a full breath, then today's, then both at once like a magic trick it did not know. I took a picture of the slip on my seat. The photo showed a shadow I could not place, the silhouette of a bulletin board pin hovering near the edge of the frame. Could have been a reflection, could have been the way morning bends through glass, could have been nothing at all. I deleted it and immediately wished I had not. On my next pass down that stretch, the way station looked shut even at noon. Closed sign dark, windows dusty, no hum. If you asked a trooper parked under the overpass, he would tell you the station has been intermittent since budget cuts 2 years back. He would shrug at paperwork that sometimes prints wrong dates and joke about ghosts who file better than he does. You would nod and go on with your day, because that is what most of us can afford. Sometimes late, I hear a soft clunk when no scale is under me. It lands just off my pulse and then learns, and for a mile or two we share tempo again. When that happens, I keep my hands light and my foot gentler than I knew I could be. If I pass that station again at night, and the lights are bright, and the windows are too clean, I promise you I will keep rolling. You do not need to believe me. Maybe I do not either. The car with my name is already up on that board, and there's a space next to it for a photo I hope never to see. If you ever come across a station that is open when the world feels closed, and the coffee is warm without a mouth to drink it, and the scale clunks for things that do not weigh, think about what you plan to sign. Think about what a signature is. It is not just a name. It is a decision written down. And if a door marked record smells like cleanliness you could drown in, maybe leave your questions unanswered for one more night. Sometimes the only way to keep your choices light is to keep them off the scale. Now it is your turn to decide what was being weighed. Me, the load, or the part of me that thinks rules are a religion. I have a slip in my log with 12:01 printed clean as a birth time, and I have a route to drive that still pays the rent. I also have a place in my head where fluorescents drop to silence, and that silence is not empty. If you have a theory, I am listening. Just do me a favor, and do not pin my picture to your board while you tell it. Story 4. The fuel stop that wasn't there I was 20 minutes from empty when the neon appeared like a promise in the dark for letters buzzing above the pines. Fuel, all caps. Do you flicker in the way a tired eye twitches? Wind carried a wet cold that bit through the cab and made the glass ache. Road shoulders were pure black water. Then the bottom of you stuttered and died for a breath, and the sign red fell. It came back, quick as a blink. If your tank has ever counted down while the night keeps its hand on your throat, you already know how that single light can feel like a voice calling you by name. My name is Leah, independent hauler, salvage and perishable. I keep my books clean, and my pride cleaner, which is not always bright. Dispatch was already hot at me for refusing a sketchy shortcut that shaved time by adding risk. This load was strawberries and radiator caps, a joke you can smell. The range read 33, and the map showed nothing between here and a ramp that had been closed since my father's CB days. I could call for help. I do not do that. Single-digit wind rolled off the hills. The storm had a metallic taste. I watched the fuel sign rise like a ship and told myself luck still visits people like me. The truck stop sat in a shallow bowl of floodlight with a diner glued to one side, a shop to the other, and pump islands marching to the edge of the lot. 10 letters on the canopy rattled. A hand-painted banner promised 24 hours in red that bled into itself. The neon buzzed like a wasp and snapped back to fell once, twice, like a study you pretend you did not hear. A string of paper flags lifted and fell. The smell of gasoline came first, the honest kind, warm and rubbery, and then something sharper under it, like solvent with a sweet throat. Steam curled from a vent near the diner, like fresh coffee thinking about being air. I coasted in with the finality of decision and nose at pump 3. The concrete under the tires felt smooth as kitchen tile. Price on the digital sign was too good to be true, the numbers steady as a heartbeat. The pump display had the old green digits, not blue, and the card slot looked like it would chew plastic. I stepped down and the cold slid up my spine. A radio somewhere was playing a song I knew from a kitchen radio that had hung by a frayed cord. A jangly guitar and a voice that could not stay on one note. Red River Valley. I smiled in spite of my worry, then tried to find the speaker. The music came from the diner, through glass, but the jukebox in the corner had its cord draped unplugged across the floor. Inside the diner, the lights were soft, and the formica shined like an operating table. Booths ran the windows, each salt shaker full to the exact same line. The jukebox blinked its song in time on my pulse, and I saw the plug hanging empty, the prongs clean, the cord curved like a sleeping snake. The clock over the register was a big chrome circle with a face like a target. Its second hand glided the wrong way around the numbers, smooth and unbothered, as if time were a conveyor belt you could flip with a switch. The attendant stood behind the counter, head tilted down, baseball cap brim cutting his face clean away. He did not look up when the doorbell chimed. He did not look up when I cleared my throat. I said evening and asked if the pumps took cards. The attendant nodded without raising his head and slid a metal tray forward. A hand rested next to it. Pale, fine hair like threads in a map, motionless. The tray held a stack of crisp paper receipts and a pen with a thin chain. The pen's chain did not move in the breeze of the heater, the way a man does not move to keep from showing breath. The prices on the wallboard looked like a joke, the kind you tell when the punchline is pain. In the corner, the jukebox worked through the song again as if the record were an inch long. The clock's second hand sighed backwards, and the minute hand agreed, like a loyal dog. I went back to the pump, because fuel solves most things. The nozzle felt colder than the air. The smell of gas rose sweet and familiar, something old in my chest relaxing while a new part tensed. The pump keypad took my car without a fight and told me to lift handle like it was a friend. When fuel hit the tank, the truck changed pitch, the way a thirsty thing says finally. I watched the gallons roll, then watched my own breath in the mirror fog and clear. The storm had blurred the edges of the world to a smear of rain and shadow. Out of habit, I looked up at the canopy, and the neon caught the corner of my eye. Fell. Fuel. Fell. Was it a broken tube or a message I was too tired to be stubborn about? I finished on autopilot and holstered the handle with a click that pleased me more than it should. The gauge inside had risen obeyingly, the range making sense again, the world returning to a shape you can drive through. Relief is its own drug. I pulled the receipt and blinked at the print. Today's date, right down to the day and month. Year printed 1979. Ink crisp, paper new, numbers confident. The top corner had a logo, a fuel pump with wings, the kind of design you see yellowed in a museum photograph. I laughed and asked the pump if it had a sense of humor. It spit a second receipt into my hand. Identical to first, the paper warm like it had been fresh off a sun. The log by the counter behind glass stopped my eyes. A battered ledger with a split spine and a page open wide. Plate numbers in a steady hand, truck colors and types. Little notes like tandem, reefer, dry. The second line of the fresh page said my plate, and under remarks it said strawberries and metal. I had not spoken to anyone yet. I had not handed over anything. I touched the glass, and my finger came away clean. The attendant's cap brim angled a little more toward the counter, hiding more of nothing. Red River Valley hopped to the next verse, as if it had decided to be a longer song. I told myself old equipment can make pretty lies. Receipts get stuck in a queue and nobody ever changed a year in the software. The ledger gets updated by some scanning system tied to the cameras over the island. I looked up to reassure myself there were cameras and saw 2 black domes in corners, their plastic fog with age. I felt steadier. There's always a silly answer that saves you for a minute. I pocketed the receipts because paper loves pockets and went into the diner for change I did not need and a coffee I did. The smell inside was perfect coffee over a plate of fried food that never arrived. The tables had a pattern of scratches like the crosshatch on a map. I stood at one and looked away, then back. The ketchup and mustard had swapped spots. The napkin holder showed a folded square with my name written on it in pencil. Leah, capital L that hooks too wide, the way my 3rd grade teacher trained me. I do not sign napkins. I picked it up and there was no imprint on the next one down, as if the pencil had written only the top layer and then stopped. The clock over the register drifted back another minute. Its second hand, so smooth it made me dizzy. The attendant moved at last. He lifted a paper cup to the hot plate and tipped the spout. The coffee poured without sound and smelled like mornings that knew your name. He backed the cup to the tray without looking up and tapped the price board with one finger. The numbers rolled like an old flip clock and settled 2 cents higher. He tapped again and they settled 2 cents lower. He tapped a 3rd time and the chalkboard behind him changed. Fresh white digits zipping over faded ones like eels. I asked if he worked alone out here. He nodded. One sharp dip that might have been a habit, even if nobody had ever stood in front of him. I took the coffee and added nothing because it was already exactly right. When I reached to pay, his finger touched the tray and the pen slithered by itself to the tip of the top receipt. The chain did not move, only the pen. I felt tired and stupid and stubborn, and I signed. My signature looked like it always does, the letters marching forward like a soldier who regrets but continues. The attendant slid the paper to the side and tucked it under a metal clip without lifting his head. I asked if the jukebox worked when it was not plugged in. He turned his head almost toward me, enough that I saw his jawline at the edge of the brim. It looked like mirror glass where skin should be, a quick silver curve that kept my face where it should be. I went rigid and pretended I had not seen it. Outside, the storm forgot how to rain for a second and then remembered hard. The neon flared and the U died to fell again, and this time the word stayed dead long enough to light the lot in a hurt way. I walked to the door and the bell chimed a different tone, deeper, like a wrong key pressed. The pump island stood exactly where they had stood, but the numbers on the digital sign now matched the chalk inside, not the green digits on my receipt. If that is confusing to you, you are not the woman watching her odometer roll down to 0 miles as she stepped into the night with a paid tank and a warm cup. I got in the cab and turned the key. Nothing. The dash lit like a birthday cake and then sighed dark, one instrument after another giving up. I tried again, and the radio hawked a throat of static. The CB gave me a slow breath I did not ask for. I looked back at the diner, without wanting to, and the jukebox's song rolled outside like someone had left the door wedged and turned the volume up. The windows were closed. The cord still hung loose. The sound lived in the rain as if rain could carry a tune. My phone showed the spinning circle, that means no, then a black screen, then a notification that said transaction approved October 12th, 1979. I laughed on purpose to hear what my laugh sounded like against a thing like that. It sounded thin and local, like me in a jar. I climbed down and went to ceiling domes because a story that ends with wires explains more than one that does not. The ladders always sit where you do not think to look until you do. I found one behind the air hose reel and pulled it under the nearest camera. I climbed, touched the dome, felt brittle plastic, and slid my fingers under. Empty space. A ring of dust like a halo where a lens should be. A stub of coke sliced clean years ago. 2 more domes. Same joke. Wires that went into the ceiling and came out again to nothing with their little copper tongues out. The red herring died in front of me without ceremony. Nobody was watching from far away. Nobody was pranking me with ceilings. It was somehow worse that the choice not to watch had been made long ago. I climbed down and the ladder pinched my palm. The smell of gasoline shifted sweet to sharp. A ripe fruit turned in one breath. It edged toward rotten, not the rank of diesel, but the candy sting of something you should not inhale. I covered my mouth and looked where the smell came from and saw a sheen on the concrete under my truck. Not a leak, a shimmer like heat where there was none. It pulled around my boots and licked the edges of my shadow like a cat testing milk. I went back inside to return the cup, like good manners would fix physics. The tables had moved closer to the counter. A salt shaker stood directly in my path with the top loosened, as if waiting to spill. The napkin holder now displayed a sheet with my name underlined twice, and a small sketch of a truck in a hand like mine. The clock's hands had found a comfortable rhythm to their reverse, and were now very proud about it. Something in me wanted to scream at the attendant until a real face turned up. That something was the tired part that breaks rules and then calls itself brave. I set the coffee down harder than I meant to. The liquid did not splash. It rose like a dome and sat calm, as if gravity owed it money. I asked the attendant what year he had. In a neutral voice I practiced for bureaucrats. He tapped the chalkboard once, and the year under prices rolled back to 1979 like a slot settling. He tapped again, and it became the right year. I told him my receipt had the wrong year. He tilted his head a little, as if listening to something under the floor. Then he lifted his chin just a fraction, and I saw it proper. Where a face should be, there was a plate of mirror glass, not polished steel, not sunglasses stacked, but a single pane that held everything in front of it. My mouth opened where his mouth ought to be, and my eyes blinked where his eyes should sit. The brim of the cap cut the top edge like a lid. A tiny chip in the mirror caught the fluorescent and pinched it into a star. The rest of him was uniform. Shirt, name tag that only said attendant, hands clean and pale. He put 2 fingers on the tray and slid another receipt forward. It already had my signature on it, hard pressed, a groove that would print on the paper beneath. I reached for the pen and then let my hand fall. If you have ever stood in front of yourself in a place that does not own you, you know the heat that runs from ears to hands and back. I told him I would be going. He nodded, as if we had agreed in a previous life. I turned toward the door, and the jukebox inside cut to silence. The song outside grew clearer, cleaner, like the record itself had been carried out to Pump Island to keep me company. I pressed the glass with my palm to push the door. The neon outside buzzed high, the "you dead" for a full 3 breaths. Fell looked like a verdict. Rain stopped halfway down from the canopy and hung there, 1,000 silver strings cut from the sky, but still trying. The air was cold without moving. A refrigerator opened to a room that forgot how to be a room. The pump sail display clicked 1 penny forward, even though the nozzle was in its cradle. It clicked back 1 penny. It clicked to exactly what I paid and held there steady like a yes. My truck's dash lit on its own, every bulb a witness. The odometer showing 0 miles, and then, for a second, a scatter of hyphens before it turning to a number that looked like mine turned inside out. I swear even the bugs under the canopy paused, as if the night had told them to listen. A thought came without permission. This place sells 2 things, gas and something else. Something measured by the clock that runs the wrong way. You take one, you pay in the other. It made more sense than the cameras. It made more sense than anything else I could bear. I put the key in the ignition and felt the teeth line up like a lock recognizing a hand. The engine turned and held, a purr I knew to trust. The range read full, and then 1 bar shy and then full again, as if the truck was negotiating with itself. The smell of gasoline thinned back to comfort, the solvent edge receding as if shy. I looked at the diner one last time. The attendant had lifted the metal clip and filed a receipt into a stack with rhythm that matched the jukebox outside. He never looked up. The mirror face held my shape without judgment, and I hated it for not hating me. I cracked the window. The cold slipped in. I said, "Thank you," the way you say it to a storm when it spares your house out of boredom. The bell chimed as the door moved, even though no hand held it. For a second, the clock over the register stopped moving backward. Then it remembered what it had to do. Driving away should be the easy part of any story. The wheels turn. The world gives you a stripe to follow. But I felt like gum had stuck under my boot, and the earth itself tugged. I pressed the accelerator, and the truck hesitated, as if waiting for an answer to a question I had not heard. I said out loud, "Not today. That is not how I do business." The hesitation let go like a hell breath. The neon caught the corner of my eye and read, "Fuel one last time," like a handshake, and I took the ramp back to the interstate with ugly gratitude in my throat. The highway swallowed me without chewing. The storm unfroze and started falling again like a bargain resumed. I checked my mirrors, and the truck stops at a pocket of light between trees, then a moth on a black wall, then nothing at all. My phone woke and vibrated from messages that it queued somewhere dumb. The bank app pinged a fraud alert on a transaction in my name. Location unreadable, dollar amount correct, date October 12th, 1979. I laughed because crying would have made me swerve. I told the empty cab that a billing glitch in a storm can look like a ghost if you let it. The cab did not argue. Miles ran the way sand runs when water finds it. The radio came back with a commercial for a lawyer who sues people like me and then pretends to be our friend. The strawberries slept behind me like a field. I sniffed, and the gasoline smell was back to being a warm animal you can pet. The delicate solvent thread was gone. I watched the clock like it owed me something, and it paid me with minute after minute in the normal direction. When I crested the last rise before the state line, the sky let go of its tantrum and showed a bruise of morning far off. I made the dock with seconds to spare on the hour they would accept, and the guard had the look of a man who had won a small victory somewhere else and wanted to share the mood. He scanned my bill and smiled and said, "I liked your note." And I said, "What note?" And he held up my receipt, not the fuel one, the dock one, where the driver sometimes scribbles a joke. In my scratch it said "fell," and then fuel underneath, one word crossed out, one circled. I had no memory of writing it. Maybe the pen on its chain taught my hand a small new trick. Maybe I wanted to tell a joke and instead told a warning. On the way back to the cab, I looked at the odometer like a thief checks a lock. It was 3 miles higher than it should have been, then 2 miles lower, then exactly what my gut said after a run like this. I breathed in, and it ticked back 1 mile while parked. I told myself I was tired. I told myself a gear can burp in a modern system. I told myself anything that could keep me moving into a day where the sun would make all of this sound like a story told by someone funnier than me. 2 days later, the bank called to confirm a charge at a business name that had not filed taxes since 1980. The woman on the phone apologized in a voice that sounded strangely recorded from an old tape. I asked her to read the name again, and she did. Slower, a string of letters that could have formed fuel if you squinted. I disputed it. She said it was already resolved and reversed last week. When a thing that happened tonight has already been undone in someone else's books, you either drink or you go quiet. I chose the second. Weeks after, coming around a bend at a speed the law would not like, I saw the glow of sign in the trees, and my hands went cold on their own. It was a casino billboard, neon bent to make a lucky 7. Nothing to do with pumps. I laughed like the tired kind of person I am and kept rolling. The smell of gasoline drifted sweet and fine, and I put the window down a crack to let a colder truth in. Far behind me a song I knew found my ear for 1 bar. It did not come from speakers. It came from somewhere that lets sound live without wires, the way a place can keep a tune after a band leaves. If I pass that way again with my range falling in the night, putting his mouth close to my throat, I do not know what I will do. I will tell you I will keep rolling. I will tell you I will not buy time from a place that sells it like it invented clocks. I will tell you any story that lets me turn a wheel and not look at a mirror that answers. But if you have ever been so tired that your truck feels like a bed with a steering column, you know how choices change their shape. Here's what I keep. The memory of neon that could not decide if it was an invitation or an obituary. The clean first smell of gasoline that turned thin and chemical and then thought better of it. A jukebox playing without a plug and then without a room. A face that showed me my own eyes and never blinked. A receipt dated before I was even a problem for anyone. And the odd way my odometer rolled backward 1 mile while I sat at a red light that no one else saw. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a road paying me back with interest it took from somebody else. If you have a theory, say it. If you have a warning, speak like a person handing off a lit match to a friend who thinks they can hold it forever. Some places do not take cash. They take what makes you wake up in the morning and decide the day runs forward. If a sign that should say fuel reads fell twice in the rain and you smell something sweet under the honest stink, maybe keep moving. If you do stop, do not sign on the line that already knows your name. Now we move to the last one for tonight. Story 5. Snowblind on Black Elk past the storm did not arrive. It swallowed. 1 minute the mountain road was a ribbon under my headlights. The next it was a white room where every wall leaned close. Snow blew sideways in thick cords. The windshield hissed under knives of ice. Somewhere inside that roar a small, faithful sound kept order. The ticking of my wristwatch, steady as a heartbeat. Then a pair of red tail lights bloomed in the void ahead, soft circles floating at driver height. The scanner said no traffic within 5 miles, but the lights drifted forward like a guide that knew my name. If you have ever had the night speak in color, you know why I eased toward them and did not blink. Call me Tom, 20 winters under me. But Black Elk Pass was new, a contract I needed to earn the next round of routes. I have driven hurricanes and ground fog, but mountain snow has its own voice, and it was not happy to meet me. Dispatch had already marked me as a question mark after I pushed back on a bad chain order last week. Make this drop by dawn, and I kept the season. Miss it, and the quiet drivers with fewer opinions would inherit my mornings. Fuel was fine, chains ready, coffee hot, pride hotter. The watch on my wrist ticked like a metronome teaching my hands a song. CB crackle came and went in thin scraps, the way old fabric tears. Between bursts, a man's bored voice slid through like someone talking in another room. "Leave the lights," he said. "They will take you in circles." Another voice laughed and said, "He always turns at mile 13. Someone hissed, turned back, and the storm chewed the rest. I told myself people tell ghost stories when the highway tries to kill you. It keeps the fear honest. The red lights brightened and held. Not brake lights, not hazard pattern. Just two steady rubies in a field of static. My wheels bit and skidded and bit again, and the watch kept time like it could pay off my debt. The first wrong thing I could offend. A road sign shook out a snow hiss. Green under a crust of white. The kind of county last replaced when people still mailed letters. Mile 13 in big block numbers. An arrow pointing left and another pointing right. Like a joke that forgot its punchline. I had not seen any other mile signs for 20 minutes, and my map put me well past 13. But the storm makes maps lie. I raised the thermos and coffee jumped my hand, hot and insistent, sent filling the cab like a kitchen morning. I set it down, licked the burn on my knuckle, and the tail lights glided forward as if satisfied I would follow. My GPS drew a line that curved and then straightened, then showed my own blue triangle sliding back over the same short stretch. I told myself it was losing lock because the sky had turned into feathers. The watch ticked on my wrist with small, almost smug confidence. Wind found a whisper through the seal at the top of my window and shaped 3 syllables with its teeth. Turn back. It said in a voice that did not belong to any person I know. I hate when the body hears language where there is only physics. Still, my foot came up an ounce, and the lights drifted closer, red circles filling in like a promise. I tried the radio. Static climbed in little ladders. For a second, a dispatcher from another state cut through with a tone like tired rain. A driver asked if anyone else saw the ghosts. Someone answered with a cough and laughter that meant fear was pretending to be brave. Ahead, the red light swam in the white, sometimes too wide, sometimes almost touching, never blinking. I told myself the obvious story. Snowplow. The lights matched the pattern a county plow might wear and move with the patience of a man paid by the hour. The shape of a blade even suggested itself in the way the snow folded near the glow. If you give your mind a hint, it will gift you a picture. I tucked him behind at a respectful distance and let the plow lead. The world was 2 red coins and the thrum of studs on ice. My watch said 2:03. A wind gust hit sideways and the lights seemed to lean with it, their halos smearing then correcting, like any physical thing pulling its weight. The GPS hiccuped, then put me back where I had been 6 minutes ago. That should have bothered me more than it did. But the lights kept their calm, and the watch said forward, forward, forward. Every 100 yards a roadside marker shouldered into view, the reflective stripe making a thin ghost. I saw the same crooked scrape on 3 in a row. The plow theory broke fast. The lights surged toward me without growing size, as if the void between us stretched and snapped. I braked and felt the trailer push like a big dog jumping your back. We danced for a second and caught ourselves. The red circles were suddenly too close. Paint your night close, and then they vanished into a wall of white that had mass. I cursed, blinked, tasted that burnt coffee again, and met my own footnote sense. If those were plow lights, I should see a wake, a trench, metal shadows, anything. There was only fresh textureless snow and the braided hiss of wind asking for my patience. Beat after beat, the pattern kept its cruelty. The red lights appeared ahead at a comfortable distance, and I settled into the idea that they belonged to anything with steel. The GPS made my little arrow draw AU without declaring it, then corrected, then drew the same U again like it enjoyed curves. My watch ticked true at my wrist, the only metronome the world had left. The wind through the seal found a better mouth to shape words and started adding a please to the turn back, polite as a stranger who knows your first name. I would have laughed if my mouth had extra room. I came up on what must have been plowed tracks at last. 2 wide trenches pressing forward, scalloped edges catching light. Relief hit with a silly laugh. I followed the tracks because that is what a living driver does when a mountain tries to be famous. The red lights ease away like a coach measuring his student. For 50 yards the world matched the story, and I warmed my hands on that small victory. Then the track slid uphill where the road did not, then ran out to the right and disappeared into clean snow like a sentence cut off. No blade, no stall machine, just absence. The smell of coffee rose again, though the lid sat locked, steam finding my cheek like breath. I told myself a mountain could throw your sense the way a casino throws clocks. I checked my mirrors and saw only the white I was making. I pulled my hat down tight to stop the whisper, and heard it anyway. Turn back. The consonants pushed by wind, even when there was no seam for it to speak through. The watch ticked. The red lights returned ahead, steady as a lighthouse on a small planet. I decided to follow them or crash through them, whichever happened first. My job was not to write a myth for other drivers to pass like salt. My job was to deliver cargo to people who never think about the weather until the apples are missing. The road threw me a kindness I mistrusted. A break in the white revealed a reflective sign, a square with a number 13, and arrows both directions again. Its bolts rhymed with frost. I slowed to look because I could not stop myself. The snow on the face had licked away in neat teardrops, as if fingers had cleaned it in a hurry. My map swore I was at mile 41. Suddenly my watch seemed louder, like a polite judge tapping a gavel. I made a choice right then and got 2 instant rewards. The first was that I did not drift into a ditch. The second was that the red lights stopped leaving me. Choice is a trap with manners. I chose to stay with them, and they gifted. The scent of coffee filled the cab again, stronger than any lid should allow, and with it came a human warmth, that smell of hands warmed above a cup, that tiny, ordinary hope. It was so sweet and wrong that I almost called my father, then remembered I was older than he had ever been. I brought the truck to 30, then 35, then a foolish number for a road that had forgotten itself. The red lights widened, as if the thing ahead had chosen to be larger to make me braver. My watch climbed toward 3 o'clock, the tick loud enough to be a companion. I thought of the contract and the way the dispatcher would say good work, with that tone that has never said good work to me. I thought of next winter and the ones after that, and the small, stubborn joy of being where a newer driver cannot yet go. I chose to accelerate and felt the trailer lurch forgive me. At 2:59, the world sharpened like a knife found a stone. The red circles flared large and wore a halo that would be brake lights on Earth. I pushed closer because forward was the only word left in the sentence. The watch ticked once, twice, and then stopped, not slow, not broken, but a decision. The sound it left behind made the storm seem loud as a stadium. And then even that noise folded in on itself and became a silence that had dimensions. The white ahead solidified into a field of red points. Not 2, but dozens, not moving, arranged in a ring like an airport pattern nobody filed. I did not stumble out. The door did that, knowing the weight of a man who thinks his hands will matter. The air was knife clean and tasted like new snow on old metal. Red columns stood at truck height all around, some dim like old Christmas lights, some bright as judgment. Shapes under the snow suggested hoods and roofs and the shoulders of men who had stepped once and then slept. I backed against the warmth of my own fender and listened to wind find 100 small mouths and make them say what they had tried to say to themselves before it shut. "Turn back," they said in a chorus that made yellow hair on my arm stand. Coffee smell flooded the hollow, impossible and instant, hot enough to fog the inside of my eyes. If you have ever smelled warm coffee in a place that should kill it in a second, you know the fear that comes with it. I turned toward the cab and saw steam curling from the thermos lid, though it was locked tight. I touched my watch. The hands at 3 o'clock, like a photograph. The tick gone for good, not dead, not sleeping. Finished. The red lights did not blink. They waited like dogs at a command someone had forgotten to give. Under a drift to my left, a chrome bar reflected my face in little ripples. A truck grill buried last year, or last decade, or last hour. I spoke because silence had too much power. I said the names I had said before, and the wind took them and shaped them into the only 3 syllables it knew how to sing here. If you think a mountain cannot learn your voice, you have not been under one at the wrong time. I climbed back in the cab and shut the door like a man closing a closet on something with teeth. The red lights in my windshield did not change. I turned the key and the engine tried with the faith of a working animal. It caught. It held. The watch on my wrist stayed stopped. A little mirror that moment I had bought by trying to pass the lantern. Driving out felt like moving my hands when they have fallen asleep. Every motion came with little pain and little doubt. The road chose a path for me that twisted where I knew it should not and straightened where I suspected it curved. I did not follow the lights. I refused. I drove by the sound of my tires and the memory of where a good engineer would put a shoulder. Once, twice, 3 times the red circles tried to appear ahead, and I blinked slow and set my eyes not between them but to the right of their glow, on a darkness that held texture. The wind lost patience with language and went back to being air with claws. I will not tell you I found a plow line or a convoy. I will not say a good Samaritan waved me through like an angel with a reflective vest. I will say I saw the mile 13 sign again, half buried, arrow both ways, and this time I did not give it my eyes. I will say the slope shifted in a way that means you are leaving a ridge and the timber takes over, and the snow began to ease off the glass like a hand remembering how to be gentle. I will say the watch on my wrist remained at 3 o'clock, and the only ticking in the cab was the deep cooling of my own fear. Morning put a bruise on the sky where the past fell behind. The county never closed the road according to the update that finally came through. The map showed a clean traverse with no loops and no hiccups. Our blue line running true as a thread pulled across fabric. I rolled into delivery yard late by their clock, and on time by something that knows more about storms than men do. The clerk signed without looking and asked me if I had fun up there, like a person who has never been cold in bone. I nodded and took the kind of breath you only get when you stop deciding and start counting. Dispatch marked me in transit at 1 a.m. and arrived at 5:12, and yet the gap on my log with a watch stop sat like a bruise on paper. I could not make a note to explain it. That did not sound like a story told to make someone else look small. The coffee in my thermos tasted like it had spent the night on a radiator, and I drank it anyway because the smell had followed me out of a place I do not intend to revisit. When I scraped the ice on the wipers, a red glimmer walked across the chrome, the way reflections do when a taillight passes behind you on the highway home. The radio gave me a weather report that described a different mountain in a different state. The CB carried a laugh I recognized from earlier, followed by a cough that did not belong to lungs, and then the easy talk of men who lived to brag about a thing they nearly did not. I touched my watch and left it where it had chosen to sleep. I will replace it. Maybe I will keep it. It is good to wear something that remembers the minute you learn a map is not a promise. In the mirror, when the sun dropped behind me, a faint red glow kept its distance at the horizon, as if the night had left a marker in my rear view, so we could find each other again. Before I sleep, here's what I would tell you if you ever take black elk in a squall. If you see tail lights where the scanner swears there is none, do not give them your lane. If the wind learns to say your fears out loud, remind it that you are busy. If your watch keeps time while your electronics forget who they are, trust the thing that cannot connect to anything but your pulse. And if you meet mile 13 in two directions at once, be rude and look away. Some signs are for folks who want to be counted by the mountain, and the mountain never has enough names. That is all for tonight's run through the dark. What if the road you take home remembers you more than you remember it? What if the places you stop aren't built for you at all, but for whatever waits when the lights go out? These 5 stories remind us that the highway isn't just asphalt and signs. It's memory, ritual, and silence that can answer back. Thank you for riding along tonight on Whispering Abyss. If the stories kept you awake, let us know which one left the heaviest print on your mind. Was it the mile marker that would not end, the voice on Channel 7, the way station that signed your name, the fuel stop that sold time, or the snowblind pass with its red lights? Make sure to like the video if you felt the chill, subscribe so you never miss another night on the road with me, and share with someone who thinks truck stops are always safe. And remember, sometimes the scariest part of the drive isn't what you see in front of you, but what follows just behind your headlights. Sleep well if you can. Before I sleep, here's what I would tell you if you ever take black elk in a squall. If you see tail lights where the scanner swears there is none, do not give them your lane. If the wind learns to say your fears out loud, remind it that you are busy. If your watch keeps time while your electronics forget who they are, trust the thing that cannot connect to anything but your pulse. And if you meet mile 13 in two directions at once, be rude and look away. Some signs are for folks who want to be counted by the mountain, and the mountain never has enough names. That is all for tonight's run through the dark. What if the road you take home remembers you more than you remember it? What if the places you stop aren't built for you at all, but for whatever waits when the lights go out? These 5 stories remind us that the highway isn't just asphalt and signs. It's memory, ritual, and silence that can answer back. Thank you for riding along tonight on Whispering Abyss. If the stories kept you awake, let us know which one left the heaviest print on your mind. Was it the mile marker that would not end, the voice on Channel 7, the way station that signed your name, the fuel stop that sold time, or the snowblind pass with its red lights? Make sure to like the video if you felt the chill, subscribe so you never miss another night on the road with me, and share with someone who thinks truck stops are always safe. And remember, sometimes the scariest part of the drive isn't what you see in front of you, but what follows just behind your headlights. Sleep well if you can. Was it the mile marker that would not end, the voice on Channel 7, the way station that signed your name, the fuel stop that sold time, or the snowblind pass with its red lights? Make sure to like the video if you felt the chill, subscribe so you never miss another night on the road with me, and share with someone who thinks truck stops are always safe. And remember, sometimes the scariest part of the drive isn't what you see in front of you, but what follows just behind your headlights. Sleep well if you can.